Today, we're going on a journey, a pretty dark one, through the history of one of humanity's most terrifying behaviors, serial crime. We're going to look at how the monsters of our world have twisted and changed through the ages. And the goal here isn't to glorify them, not at all, but to try and understand what in the world creates them. So, this is the big question we're tackling today. Are the monsters who walk among us basically always the same, just wearing different clothes? Or does society itself, its fears, its technologies, its whole structure, actually shape the kind of evil it gets? Let's dive in and find out. Okay, let's start way, way back. We're going to a time when the world was pretty much explained by folklore and magic. This was an era where a horrible crime wasn't just breaking the law, it was often seen as an act of, supernatural evil. And the way they responded to it, well, it was just as brutal. What do you think this number is? 544. Well, that is the claimed number of victims of a single man from the High Middle Ages. His name was Peter Nars. I mean, it's a staggering figure, but it's the reason behind his crimes that really tells you everything you need to know about the horror of his time. And this is where it gets really, really twisted. What's so horrifying about Peter Nars is how his crimes were completely tangled up in the superstitions of his day. See, he wasn't just killing, he was harvesting. He truly believed that the hearts of fetuses were key ingredients for dark magic rituals, and that their fat could be used to make candles that would knock people out, making them easy to rob. I mean, this wasn't just murder, it was like a dark, magical business enterprise. So what happens to a monster like this back then? Well, the justice of the era was basically a mirror image of the crime's own brutality. Nars's execution was a 3-day public spectacle of torture that's almost impossible to imagine. Now, sure, the number of his victims was probably exaggerated while they were torturing him, but the public's reaction shows you how savagery was met with, well, more savagery. It was just a vicious, vicious cycle of violence. And you might think, okay, this guy Nars was a one-off, a total anomaly. Nope. Meet Peter Stump, also known as the Werewolf of Bedburg. He confessed that the devil himself gave him a magical belt that let him turn into a wolf. And just like Nars, his crimes involved cannibalism and targeting the unborn, even saying he ate their hearts as delicacies. You see the pattern here, right? In this era, the monster's story was almost always tied up with the supernatural. Okay, let's jump forward a few centuries to the 1800s. The world changes completely. The Industrial Revolution is roaring, creating these huge, sprawling cities where you could be totally anonymous. And in those gaslit alleys and crowded slums, a brand new kind of monster is born, one who doesn't need magic to be invisible. He just uses the crowd as camouflage. And this right here becomes the defining mystery of this new era, and it's perfectly captured by the most famous serial killer of all time, Jack the Ripper. His reign of terror wasn't some public rampage. It was a series of quiet, deadly, precise strikes that left a city of millions completely paralyzed with fear, hunting for a ghost they could never, ever find. In all the legend and the media storm, it's so important that we remember these names. These are the 5 women that most experts agree were the Ripper's victims. They were real people with real lives that were cut short in the most brutal way imaginable. And the killer's method, the almost surgical-like mutilations and organ removal, it suggested he had a real knowledge of human anatomy, which turned him from just a thug into a calculating, almost scientific predator. But the horror didn't stop with the murders. Oh no. This killer seemed to absolutely love taunting the very society he was terrorizing. Police and newspapers got flooded with letters claiming to be from the Ripper. Most of them were fakes, of course, but one stood out. The From Hell letter. It arrived with a piece of a human kidney, and this one chilling message. The urban phantom wasn't just a killer. He was putting on a performance for the entire world. So as we roll into the 20th century, the focus shifts again. With the birth of psychology and psychiatry, we start to get less concerned with what the monsters did and way more obsessed with why they did it. We start looking for the source of evil, not in fairy tales or city shadows, but deep inside the twisted, broken landscape of the human mind. And there's maybe no more horrifying example of this than the case of Albert Fish. His life story is like a terrifying roadmap of a mind just completely falling apart. The evil in him didn't come from a deal with the devil. It started in an orphanage where he was taught to connect pain with pleasure. That trauma just festered for decades, and it finally exploded into self-harm, religious delusions, and one of the most depraved murders in American history, the killing of little Grace Spud. And it was only when he sent a letter, 6 years later, describing every horrific detail that they finally caught him. And if you need a picture of just how deep this psychological damage really went, think about this. After they arrested him, doctors took x-rays of Albert Fish's body. They found 29 needles that he had shoved deep into his own pelvic area over the years. It's just a stark physical picture of a man totally consumed by his own psychosis. Now, at the same time, halfway across the world in the Soviet Union, another monster was hunting. But his reign of terror lasted for years, not because of psychological tricks, but because of a massive failure of the very science that was supposed to catch him. So get this, investigators had him. They had Andrei Chikatilo, the butcher of Rostov, right in their grasp. They had a semen sample from a crime scene, and it was blood typed as AB. But when they tested Chikatilo's blood, it came back as type A. Impossible match, they thought, and they let him go. The mistake? He had a super rare biological condition where the blood type in his semen didn't match the blood type in his veins, a 1 in a million anomaly that allowed him to walk free and keep killing for years. So the hard forensic science completely dropped the ball. But a new kind of science, criminal profiling, absolutely nailed it. A psychiatrist named Alexander Bukhanovsky created this unbelievably detailed profile of the killer they were looking for. He painted this picture of a man who seemed normal on the outside, married, kids, a job, but was deeply, deeply damaged underneath. The profile was so spooky accurate that when investigators finally looked at Chikatilo again, it fitted like a glove. It was a huge turning point, showing that understanding the mind of a killer was just as crucial as finding his DNA. Okay, let's come to our final stop, the modern age, the late 20th and early 21st centuries. Now, global travel and big societal changes created killers whose number of victims was almost impossible to comprehend. But here's the thing. At the very same time, forensic science had evolved into this powerful, almost inescapable net. 193. Just let that number sink in for a second. That is the confirmed victim count of just one man, Luis Garavito, known in Colombia as La Bestia, the Beast. At least 193 children. It's a number so big it's hard to even wrap your head around. He preyed on poor and vulnerable kids, pretending to be a priest or a teacher to lure them away. So how do you catch a monster responsible for that? Well, it all came down to a stupid mistake. While he was trying to burn evidence, he accidentally set himself on fire and ran off, leaving behind a gold mine of clues. From just one pair of eyeglasses, police knew his age and his prescription. From his shoes, they figured out his height and that he had a limp. Modern forensics took these tiny, discarded items and built a profile so exact it led them right to Garavito. The Beast was brought down by his own carelessness and the incredible power of science. And this might be the most unbelievable part of the story. Even though he confessed to killing nearly 200 children and got a sentence of over 1,800 years, Colombian law capped his sentence at a maximum of 40 years. It was then cut down to just 22 because he helped authorities find more bodies. He ended up dying in prison in 2023, but that legal outcome just raises this massive question. Can our justice systems ever truly account for evil on this kind of scale? Before we wrap this up, I want to go back to Albert Fish for just a moment. Those were his last words right before his execution. I don't even know why I'm here. It's a statement of just pure disconnection. After all the horror, all the pain he caused, all the investigation, we're left with this final, chilling glimpse into a mind so broken, it couldn't even grasp its own reality. So that brings us all the way back to where we started. We've seen evil that was driven by superstition, hidden by city crowds, explained by psychology, and finally tracked by technology. It really does seem like every era gets the monster it creates, and then it builds the tools to fight it. But as our world gets more and more complex, are we actually stopping evil, or are we just forcing it to evolve into new, more sophisticated forms that we haven't even learned to see yet? That's the thought I'll leave you with.